Well, there we go. Nothing like the Union Jack blocking you, but it is a beautiful flag. So here we are. Thank you very much for joining me on the Southern Report once again. It's been a rather busy day, I will say that. Now, 2016, there were two monumental events. One, of course, was the Brexit vote, where 17,410,752 members of this incredible isle voted with a majority of over a million to leave the European Union, a construct of interestingness that we can discuss for many hours, which I have. But citizens came out and voted in the most, I think, the biggest total in regard to voting, in regard to a referendum in the history of these amazing isles. That's what happened. Also, we then spurred on the first Trump administration. I think even Mr. Bannon admitted that. So that is what happened in 2016. 9 years ago, just over that, and we are on the edge of going into 2026. I'm just stating the obvious. There are those times when people write things and they have to be protected. And one of those gentlemen is the person I'm going to bring on now. And I'm going to bring on dear Gully Foyle. And he is going to talk about a book that he has written. I know what it's like to be censored. I know what it's like to then be disparaged. But we soldier on because we have a cause that is right. And the truth is the truth, no matter if other people want to choke on it. So here we are. Just bring my guest in. Gully, thank you so much for joining me. It's very kind of you.
It's an absolute pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Gully, this is rather interesting for me because I can't see you, which which is, as I've said, that doesn't have to be talked about because it's obvious reasons. And because we are in a very, very interesting time within our country. So as I reminded everyone in 2016, 17,410,752 people with a majority of over a million voted to leave the European Union, a referendum that Mr. Cameron promised and then thought that he was going to actually win. In fact, most of our members of parliament, Gully, thought that they were going to win, bar a few who were honest, even though we're still waiting for Jeremy Corbyn to admit, I went in the booth and which way did he actually vote. But we know that. And the comment I made at the time, my friend, was, I feel as though I'm living in a communist state because suddenly all the members of parliament seem to be agreeing with each other, saying, we quite like being told what to do. And suddenly that wonderful television series, Yesminster, was unfolding in front of my eyes, where they just needed to be told what to do when all this paperwork started appearing, as dear Christopher Booker reminded me once in 2016 from 1992. Gully, straight to you. Please tell me about the book that you have written and why you have written this book.
Well, I think the main reason I wrote it, and strangely, I kind of accidentally started writing it. I didn't set out to be an author. I set out purely as a someone engaging on social media, being challenged as many of us have over the last decade of the question that gets thrown in our faces on a daily basis, or for me, hundreds of times a day: can you name a single tangible benefit of Brexit? And of course, we can all name one or two. But the difficulty is, for many of us, the information that we consume on a daily basis is that which is presented to us. We don't have the benefit of and for many of us, the time and the energy to trawl through trade documents and to trawl through legal texts, to find out things that our journalistic friends have decided to not present to us. That there is an inherent bias there of what is deemed to be news, and so we're only presented with things that certain people want to show us. So Over the years, I've been asked that question many times, and about 3.5, 4 years ago, I was asked to name 10 benefits, and I thought, well, at least you're admitting that there's probably not. So at least we're starting at a good point there. So I spent a lunchtime trying to come up with 10. I found it very easy to do, and sent it back to this particular person on Twitter, and then thought, well, it's obviously it's not going to be just this one person that's going to be interested in this. Others may also be interested. And lo and behold, many people were. And by the time I'd expanded it to, and I've just added another bonus 4 onto it, the Daily Express picked it up and ran it as an article. Now, personally, I thought at the time, well, 14's not much to really write home about. The fact that so many people think it's impossible to name one, I guess, means that 14 is impressive. But over the years, I've been listening carefully and writing down news stories every day of what's coming up and researching in the background, and so I've collated hundreds of benefits of small and large measure that I think, for the most part, many people in the UK would be surprised to read about, and probably completely unaware that change has happened. So at the point where I'd been approached by a website, Global Britain, to do a longer version of the text of the, at the time, the 50 that I'd written. And once I'd written those, I have quite an obsessive compulsive approach to research and writing text. So with each one of the benefits that I wrote, I need to write it in 5 different text lengths for different audiences to present on different platforms. So I realized that after I'd done that, I'd basically written 100 plus sides of A4 of all the research I'd done, all the source material that I'd gathered. And so as soon as that document was finished, I created a brand new blank Word document and put 75 Brexit benefits on the front of it as a cover and started typing. And it wasn't until about 3 or 4 days later that I realized that I'd made a decision there to become an author somewhat unintentionally. And so here I am. But really, the reason I wanted to write it is fundamentally that I want the book to exist. I want there to be a record of these things. And the challenges so far to the content, that there have been many very vitriolic attempts to take down the book, have so far been completely unsuccessful, because it is just a collation of facts. As you said at the start, it doesn't matter if someone's upset about reality, it will still be reality. It doesn't matter how much you stomp your feet about the sun rising in the morning, it will still rise in the morning, and it doesn't care about your tears. So yeah, I wanted it to exist. And there's a law that I don't know whether many people are aware of or not, that anything published in the UK has to go into the British Library. So there is a copy of a book of Brexit benefits in the British Library now for all people to read for all eternity, or as long as the British Library exists. And that happens to give me a certain sense of pride that I know that it's there, and it can't be deleted from history.
What a wonderful thought. I think I need to go in there, find it, and put it next door to dear Richard North and Christopher Booker's book, The History of Europe and the Great Deception, and put them next door to each other. And plus, there are others books like Brussels Laid Bare, in regard to the dear woman that was then trying to do an audit on the EU, and then realised, I've forgotten her name, and then realised that of course the books don't add up.
Indeed.
Gully, what do we do with people that turn around? I mean, I'm going to have to ask you this, because if I'm honest with you, I share that opinion, and concerned about that opinion. What do you say to people that, okay, so you're talking about these 75 Brexit benefits, but we haven't really fully left the EU. We haven't fully left.
Yeah, there are still aspects. There's the actual legal departure, and then there's the mental departure. And as you mentioned in your introduction earlier, there's the MPs that we have and our civil service are very tied into the idea that they can get paid the same for doing less work, that someone else is going to make all the decisions, and they rubber stamp it. Isn't that so much easier if someone else does your job for you? But what we want as the British people, and I think it's a fair statement to say, is that you're paying for someone to do a job. You believe the job is important, running the country is important, providing the administration of the things that are better done at a government level than at an individual level. That is an important job, and we pay people to do it. And actually delegating that decision and that hard work to a distant bureaucratic group who try to make decisions based on compromise positions between 28, now 27 different countries isn't the best way to do it. Whether or not they make good decisions or bad decisions on an individual case-by-case basis, the fact that you are having to try and find a middle ground position that keeps everybody happy means that you're not keeping anybody happy. You know, I've very often used the example of because you get the case presented, you get the argument presented that as one large group of 450 million people, if we go out and try and negotiate something, then we're going to get a better deal because there's 450 million people asking rather than 65 million people asking. So you're going to get a better deal, you're going to get more bargain, or like we're going to Costco and buying in bulk, you know, that you're going to get a better deal because of it. And the actual reality of the world is that when you're negotiating as 28 or 27 people, you first have to come up with your negotiating position. And that negotiating position is 28 different countries' vested interests, 28 political positions and personal difficulties and emotional positions. And it's like going into Domino's and ordering a pizza for 28 people. And one of them's vegan, one of them's celiac, one of them's eating gluten-free. And you end up with, great, you got a pizza £2 cheaper, but it's got 0 toppings on it and tastes like cardboard. You can't keep everybody happy if you try to give too many people an answer that fits everyone, you will please no one. And what we've seen with the what has come from leaving the EU, and you look at trade deals. I've spent an awful lot of time reading the trade deals that we've done and the trade deals that the EU had. And what you see is that these amazing trade deals that we were told we couldn't get better ourselves because the EU's got this amazing heft that it can go into negotiations with. We were able to secure exactly the same trade deals on exactly the same terms and did it in a space of 18 months. And we said, well, we'll do the same deal as the EU. We're the UK, we're important too, and we got the same terms. And then with every trade deal we've tried to improve since leaving, be it with Japan, with Singapore, with Ukraine, we're negotiating with Turkey right now, every single one has been able to be improved. And it's not even an argument that they weren't able to be improved. And those countries said at the start of negotiations, yes, of course these trade deals can be improved, because there were things that the EU were unwilling to negotiate on. They were unwilling to include in trade deals as there were too many vested interests. There were too many protectionist opinions. And there are entire industries that exist within other EU member states that we just don't do. We don't grow oranges. We don't grow olives. We don't need to protect those industries as they're not our industries. So we are able to be a more nimble, more reactive, and more proactive nation independently. And that's just the demonstrable truth now that we've seen over the last 5 years.
And that's something that I passionately believe in 2016 within my own small role and having the honor then to meet Richard North and then Christopher Booker. And also leading up to that, knowing that the referendum was going to happen, took this very seriously to play my part. Like, as I've said, 17,410,752 people did. And let's just be honest, we and this for people watching abroad, eventually that we now have the Prime Minister of the UK, who then became a member of Parliament in 2015, I think, taking Frank Dobson's seat. Frank Dobson sadly died. He then took the seat. And then spent, as soon as we had voted out, spent his time doing whatever he could, along with others, Gina Miller, etc., to make sure that we never left, and that we need to have another second referendum after the biggest historical vote in voting history in this country.
Mm.
Um, so, and this is where we're at. We were then fighting that for years. We then had Cameron step down. Theresa May came in and said, "We're all Brexiteers now." Really, love? I don't think I ever believed you. And then, as we know, we went to the Boris going, "Let's get Brexit done." And Gully, and I will shut up in a minute. The key thing is this to me: any country that's not in charge of its own laws, not in charge of its own money supply or its coinage, not in charge of its own language, and not in charge of its own borders, is not a country anymore. And that is why people were very passionate to vote in the way that they did. And having met this head on, and so did dear Richard North, is the fact that you have a plan to leave the European Union, and immediately you are vilified because of the propaganda machine that then came against you, as we have witnessed by incredible TV shows like Yes Minister. And as far as I'm concerned, fact and fiction, no, it's true. It just used an incredible comedic way to explain it. Gully, what is, in your opinion, the number one benefit? Because people are still seeing all the illegal immigration that we have coming over the channel. I do apologize. We've got to talk about this because this is the reality of it that has not been stopped for many, many years. But what is the number one benefit that you then have found out of 75 of leaving, in your belief, of leaving the European Union?
So the difficulty on this one is that the book itself, and I give a definition at the start of the book of what I mean by tangibility, what I
Right.
mean by plausible and possible differences with the EU as well, to try and make it bulletproof of these things are undeniable. There are more things that we've done as well. Good example, the COVID vaccines, whether or not you believe in the process that we went through with COVID, we were able to get the vaccines released quicker than we could have done if we were still within the EU and following the EU vaccines approach. Now, I haven't included that in the book at all, solely because it was plausible. So it was possible that we could have done different. It wasn't plausible that we would have done different. And so because of that distinction, that there is not a chance in hell that if we were still in the EU, that we would have gone in a different direction to the rest of the EU on how to approach vaccines. The fact that we did do that is because of the mental shift of the fact that we'd left, and the parliament, the people who were actually in government at the time, being willing to have that mental distance from the approach within the EU. So there's that first. My biggest benefit from my personal beliefs on the reasons we left is an intangible one. It is the return of sovereignty and the value that has, the ability for us as a people to say, we are not happy with the people who are setting our laws, and so we are able to remove them. There's the famous Tony Benn speech in Parliament some decades ago about
Yes,
who is it that writes your laws, and
Yep.
if you're unhappy with them, can you remove them?
Yep.
The fact that we have now returned that state, which should have been how we always were as a nation, is the most beneficial thing to me. And the last election in 2024 showed us exactly that power. The British people were not happy with what the current government were doing, with the decisions that were being made, and all of those decisions were being made in Parliament by the government now. They weren't being made in the EU, or at least directly, they weren't being made from the EU. And so the people decided that they weren't happy and they removed the government and put in a different one. And we can see just from the last 18 months that they're also very unhappy with the current one and the decisions being made.
Absolutely, and quite rightly.
And so at some point they will remove them as well. And this may take us a couple of cycles for our political elite to realize that they are now answerable to the people and they have no one to hide behind. I don't want our MPs to be able to hide behind a political body thousands of miles away saying, well, we don't have a choice here. We have to do as we're told because the EU did this. Evil, naughty EU, but we still want to be members. That's not good enough. If we are not happy with the legal structures that we exist within, if we are not happy with the political system that we exist within, we as the people of the United Kingdom should be able to change that and to elect people that we are happy with, whichever which way that goes, be it going to the left or going to the right. If that is what we are choosing as the people, then I'm happy with that, even if I don't like the decisions being made. So there was a certain bittersweet nature to the 2024 election, as I saw the British people taking back the control of the decision making and of the political process and putting in place a different government and getting rid of one that they were very unhappy with. I didn't want them to put a Labour government in place, but they had the power returned to them. And since then, Labour have taken advantage of the fact they are outside of the EU with many of the decisions that they've made. One of their flagship policies that they regaled us with on the run up to the election and put in place very quickly was the putting fees on private school, putting taxes on private school fees.
Yeah.
That is not possible in the EU. It is against EU law. The Greeks tried to do it in 2014 and they were told they weren't allowed to, and to row back the policy. So that is, within the book, one of the benefits that I've listed. I'm not personally happy that they did it. I think it's a stupid decision. But I'm happy that the government in power in my country can put in place a policy that they were elected saying they would do, and that they were elected based on their manifesto. So I'm happy that you have those policies and be elected on them and follow through with them, even if I don't like them personally.
No, they've also put in policies, let's just say this as a disclaimer, or they're trying to, that weren't even in their manifesto.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that will be part of the downfall of the party, because they are enacting things that no one has voted for. And we live in a world where if people choose to want to access information, they can. There is no hiding from the electorate anymore. Once the electorate has decided that they need to investigate and read more about what you're saying because they don't believe you anymore, then they will go out and they will read more. And that is what is happening. And the Labour Party the clock is ticking on them now. And I don't know how much longer they're going to last in their current form, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't last that much longer. Certainly, Keir Starmer is not going to see 2027 as the leader of the party. That much is almost certain at this stage. But I'm happy that the electorate has those powers now. But to go back to your question, because I kind of went off at a tangent there.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So those who wish to remain in the EU are still doing calculations of, from an economic basis, was it better to have been paying X amount and getting X amount in return based on 2016 figures? They're still looking at 2016 figures. They're still looking at the OBR EFO of 2020 with the 4% long-term reduction in GDP growth based on figures from 13 other groups based on 2016 to 2018 economic data. They're still reciting that on a daily basis. when in actual fact, the real data, not the forecast, the 5-year-old forecasts, the real data of what has actually happened with our global trade hasn't been anywhere near the inflated projections that were put out there. The projections that the British people looked at and went, well, if that's true, I still want to leave. I'm happy with leaving and regaining sovereignty and taking an economic hit in the short term, because in the long term, I think that that's probably the right direction for us. But they're still using those projections based on 2016 figures and trying to negotiate the idea that we should rejoin based on how we were members in 2016. And in the multi-annual budget that the EU sets out, they do a 7-year budget, and in the 7-year budget that they'd set out in the period where we had the vote to leave in 2016, they had a cap on the total gross national income of the EU, how much of that could go towards the EU budget. And it was at 1.2% of total EU GNI would be the ceiling above which they couldn't ask for more to go into the EU budget. In the following period, it went up to 1.4%. In the budget that's currently being negotiated to start in 2027, it has gone up to 2%. So the amount that the EU can take from member states of its gross national income has almost doubled since we left. So the argument over, oh, well, we were only paying a net 10 to 12 billion a year, that would now be, we would be paying a net 24 billion a year. And actually the damage, there was a really interesting LSE paper that came out in December looking at the goods trade, UK goods imports and exports since leaving. And the paper said the previous forecasts and things and doppelganger models that have been put out there are just looking at comparing the UK to other countries and how other countries have performed and trying to invent a fictional Earth in an alternate reality that they can't observe and predicting what that Earth would look like, and then saying, oh, well, it's obviously worse because we invented it to look like it's worse. And why anyone listens to that, God only knows. But looking at the actual data of what the trade figures show is that, yes, there has been a damage to goods exports, but it is nowhere near the level of 4%. And it is more like 0.5% to 1%. And when you look at that, that hit is about 24, 25 billion a year less in goods exports. So the profit on that exports would be significantly less than that. You know, you see the figure banded around of, if the 4% of GDP figure was correct, it would be around 100 billion a year less trade, which would mean about 40 billion less a year going to the taxman. So if actually that 100 billion is 25 billion, then the 40% is significantly less than our net annual payments would have to be for being a member of the EU. That alone, that one item of actually our net membership fee would be multiple times larger a year now than the actual hit that we've seen to our goods export trade. And our services export trade has grown since we left. So that can just be ignored. You know, that's the positive thing. Actually, if something costs more than you get from it, then that's a bad thing. And so we are net better off just on that metric alone. And that's just one of the 75 items in the book.
Gully, and the other thing is, and I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say it, because the sad thing is that in regard to the election, and I hear what you're saying totally, because people can, well, at that time we thought there was free speech, but potentially not either. But the other thing is that 40% or 38.9% of the electorate decided, who could vote, decided not to vote. and they took that decision because they were so disgusted by the previous government, and in fact most probably disgusted by any person that was sitting in Westminster, thinking none of these people are going to represent us at all. And I think in many ways there's certain good feeling for that. And also, when we've got such a, this is my opinion, when we've, to me, got such an incompetent chancellor, there is no understanding of, in my opinion, economics. Plus, then saying, "Oh, I have had to fail this." Sorry, I end up going into the accent. 22 billion black hole. Where did that come from? And of course, the recent budget that's just happened being profoundly disingenuous, and we just think, "Are you actually lying here?" You said a profound thing to me, which is this whole thing of the mental attitude we have left. But we've got a deindustrialization happening in Europe, but happening as a nation. When we look at people like Miliband deciding to get rid of, shutting down Grangemouth oil refinery along within Lincolnshire. Am I right? Am I wrong? What are we facing? What are we facing here, Gully? With you being, I understand it, so positive with the benefits of leaving Brexit. Where are those benefits? Speaking to the situation we're in at the moment, I know you've just talked about how much money we'll be paying the EU, but people are not feeling the benefit. They're feeling that prices are just going up and up and up. Energy prices is a huge issue because of the ideology of madness. But that's my opinion. But how do you address all that with all the other benefits that you can talk about?
So we returned the keys to the country back to Parliament. The problem we have is that a number of the members of Parliament that at least we had, and I think to a certain extent we still have, are not willing to use them. They have the levers, they can change things, but the ideology, the mental ideology that is in place is one of EU subjugation. That somehow, uniquely in the world, the British people are incapable of coming up with good ideas, of writing their own laws, when history tells us that, if anything, we are better at doing it than many. And equal opportunities abound here. There is no reason why a British Parliament cannot make decisions for the best interests of the British people. The problems that we are seeing is that we have an establishment that doesn't want to use those levers for fear of being seen to be out of step with the people which they idolize, that they look towards. This European mentality that somehow those on the continent are better than us, and it's ridiculous. Especially when we're in an era of, we're constantly being preached to about how everyone is equal, how everyone has equal ability if given the same opportunities in life. And I do truly believe in that when we're born, we are all blank slates, and we will have, dependent on the experiences that we have in life and our interests that grow throughout that period of nurture. I think the differences between us that are in nature, not in nurture, are very small. I mean, they exist, but they are there. But the idea that somehow that argument of we are all equally able to do whatever we want to do in life, but the Europeans are better than any Brits. It's just a silly position to take. And we also hear that the argument being made very often about how, the UK was leading the EU. We were the ones helping write the rules. We were the ones who were informing the opinions and guiding the EU. That's part of the problem. We had a problem with both the way in which the rules were being written and the rules themselves. And we've solved one part of that problem, but it's only one part of it. And actually, if you are still mentally chained to the EU institutions and the EU mentality and the belief that our betters live overseas and we should just listen to them and do what they do because it's probably the better idea, then we are never going to escape this doom loop that we find ourselves in.
I agree, and yeah. I agree. And sorry, Gully.
I'm a big believer in the scientific method, but also in the idea that if you look at a situation logically and you map out, as business analysts and program managers do when they're dealing with a large problem that they're being presented with, then you look at, well, what is it we want to achieve here? What does success look like? And you mentioned the energy mix that we have in the UK. If we were to map out what was the thing that we were trying to solve, you would say, well, we want everyone in the country to have enough energy, and for the amount of energy that we have to be sufficient to be able to grow the industries of the future so as to be in a competitive position for the decades to come. So we need to increase the amount of energy that we have, not just meet our current needs. That method of delivery needs to be one so that it is available at all times at the point of use, that it is available bountifully, but also at a price point that allows our businesses to grow and to thrive. And then you add on to that the other criteria that you would have of what success would look like. Right, well, we need to not destroy our environment in doing so. Fine, take that as a given. We need to continue to make sure that our country is one that we can live in and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. But you map out all of those scenarios and all those criteria. What you find yourself with is we should have built 50 small nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
Get a design, agree it, give that design planning permission, and then put them equidistant across the country so that no one can complain that they are too close to one, because everyone's too close to one. No one's getting any special treatment. Draw an isometric grid across the country and put one on every corner.
And give Rolls-Royce the contract.
Exactly. And the millions of people who are out of work in the country, train them up so they can help build it. Be it if they are on the low skills end and they're going to be a brickie, or all the way through to make sure that we've got the people who can be the nuclear scientists who are going to run the place. And that, to me, is a strategy. And yes, it's probably a 20-year strategy. But as we saw with Nick Clegg, the video that continues to be viral to this day, him saying, well, if we started doing this, we wouldn't be ready until 2024. Like, well, yeah, if you built it when you should have done, the best time to have done this strategy was 20 years ago. The second best time to do it is right now. We need to get on with this.
Absolutely. And he needs to be questioned about windmills and various contracts and links, but that's another story. I just really want to go back in regard to a little bit of history, really, because as a nation, we were taken into the common market, being told that we would be benefit in regard to less trade barriers between 5 or 6 other countries, and that isn't it a good idea, etc. And the fact that we don't want war, we just want to be able to trade with each other. And then, of course, as far as I'm concerned, with Mr. Monet, it then becomes this huge federalist edifice that is then become, but no one's ever really explained that. And before anyone says, but you're a conspiracy theorist, no, I'm not. It's fact.
Yes.
Read the books, find out. But the other thing I want to say in regard to that, Gully, could you explain to me, in regard to members of the European Parliament, what opportunities they have or have had when in the past when we were there to actually put policy forward? It didn't work like that. Why did everyone over here believe that they put policy forward? No, they didn't. The commissioners did. Why didn't we seem to understand that? A few people did, but that was all a big con of propaganda, in my own personal opinion as well, sir.
The thing that I find amazing to this day, because I get attacked on a daily basis on social media, and to be fair, I give it back in both barrels. You know, if someone isn't polite and respectful to me, I will give them it back in equal measure. But the level of there's no other word for it, the level of ignorance about how the EU operates and how it works, just it astounds me when talking to people who want to go back into it. And one of the great examples is the fact that the euro, if a country wanting to accede to the EU now since 2000, I think it is 2001, it has been mandatory as part of your accession criteria, which isn't a negotiation. It is a list of things you have to achieve and have to agree to be a member. Of course it is. You don't write your own membership requirements when joining a club. The club tells you what the requirements are, and you say, yes, sir. And the mandatory requirements, the obligation, is that you are agreeing to take the euro. It's not a choice. You have to work towards taking the euro, and when you are seen to be ready to do so, the EU will tell you that it is now time for you to take the euro. Wow. That is an obligation, and it has been in every single accession since 2000. And to this day, I still have that argument with people, and I show them the criteria. You know, these are the accession criteria. This is where it is written in the treaty that these countries signed. Some may be choosing to ignore the fact that they have signed an international treaty that says they are going to do something. I have the oh yeah, but what about Sweden? Yeah, but what about Hungary? I'm like, yes, here is the treaty that they signed that said that they would take the euro. The fact that they're not doing, and the EU hasn't yet decided to punish them for it, to sanction them for it. We are not a nation that signs things and then reneges on those agreements. And I find it astounding, the notion that during a debate, let's say a second referendum was happening and the question of the euro came up, I find it astounding, the idea that a British Prime Minister would say to the nation, so we want to rejoin the EU and we're going to sign this thing, and this thing says we have to take the euro, but don't tell the EU we don't mean it, and we're not going to take the euro, we're just going to sign it but not mean it. And the idea that the members of the EU can't speak English, they can't understand, like, that conversation is a complete non-starter. And there was a really interesting survey that came out. It was Queen Mary University of London did a survey with YouGov, not mentioning the word Brexit at all. They asked a series of questions to over 4,000 people, and it was these particular areas of policy, of government policy. Do you think that this particular area should be something that the UK government decides alone, that it decides in partnership with other international bodies, or that it takes instruction from another international body? And on those 20 items, they were all things that were either partially or fully within the remit of the EU if we were a member. Right. So some of them we would have no choice in at all. And some of them are like what the minimum VAT rate is. Yeah. So things that we had no choice in at all. Some are the currency, some, some really good options in there, but all things that would not be within our full control. And even Lib Dems, even Green Party members came back with a majority of wanting the UK government alone to be in charge of those policies. And for me personally, I think the only reason that differs from the polling that you see of, I want to rejoin the EU, is ignorance. That they don't know that the EU is in control of those things when we were members before. And the process of Brexit has polarized people to such an extent that there's no longer a willingness to believe that you might be wrong about something. That actually you've set up your fortress, you've put up your shields, and that's it. You've picked your side, so therefore I must agree with that side. And if they'd mentioned Brexit in that survey, I have no doubt at all that the Lib Dems and the Labour and Greens would have all gone, yeah, I want the EU to be in charge of that thing. Because that word wasn't used, their colours were shown, and that actually the majority position of the UK voter, is that actually we want the government that we can elect to be in charge of the laws that we have to follow, so that if they make bad decisions, we can remove them. And that's just, it's simple logic that it defies belief for me that we would be willing to even entertain a different scenario there. You know, if you were
Well,
to tell,
I find absolutely, and part of the frustration now is when you've got a government cancelling elections, council and mayoral elections, plus they are changing various borders. In regard to that, that needs to be said. And Gully, I'll push back slightly because one of my concern is whether we even have a country by the time of the next election, in the way that we would actually recognize it, which is one of the reasons why we are passionately having this conversation. Um, Gully, what about the ECHR? What about that, which is constant? Oh, well, we can't leave. Yes, we can. Oh, now I'm promising to leave because the Conservative government, I mean, in many ways, we could say, why didn't they reverse every single thing that Tony Blair brought in under his tenure, or the previous Labour government? Why didn't they do this is another interesting conversation. But what about the ECHR? The ECHR that came about in after the Second World War to defend people's rights. I can understand that, but actually now we need to get rid of it, because if we want people to be taken out of this country, then we must be able to do that a lot easier than we find ourselves. We're in the sort of last 10 minutes. So, Gully, over to you, sir.
So, from my reading on this subject, and I've not gone into the normal level of depth of research that I normally do, as my focus has been on benefits of departure more so than the ECHR. But I have done some reading in the area on it, and my take has been that, as you kind of alluded to there, it was set up with good intention, but in a world that was very different to the one we find ourselves in today.
Absolutely.
Where actually those who were looking for aid were genuinely looking for aid. And we now find ourselves in a world where migration is so much easier than it used to be. And the differences between different countries is so obvious and stark and available to all. Again, the information revolution that we've seen over the past few decades means that someone in a very poor, what we would previously call a third world country, can still access the internet and go and look at a video and see how nice it is in the UK. As much as we know that the UK could be so much better than it is right now, it is still one of the best places to be in the world, comparatively so. The people who live in the UK are some of the most privileged people in the world, because they have access to the nation and the facilities that we offer. And so, of course, if you're living somewhere that is so much worse, of course you're going to want to. And then someone comes to you and says, look, if you can give me 5,000, I will put you on a dinghy. It will probably get you there, but 1 in 100 might drown, but you'll probably get there. And then when you get there, if you refuse to give them any information, you've thrown away your passport. And as we've seen in the press the last few days, if you just say don't know, or you're a 40-year-old and you say you're 15, if they can't prove otherwise, then they're going to have to keep you, because they can't send you anywhere. They can't deport you if they don't know where you're from or who you are. So if you turn up in a boat and say, my name's Dave and I'm from Syria, what are you going to do about it? Then we can't send them anywhere. The only solution that we had was Rwanda. And a lot has been said about Rwanda, completely false. The core benefit of the Rwanda scheme was that there is an airport in a different country that is willing to have people land and they don't know who they are. That was the sole benefit. They will let us fly anyone. And if that person said, my name's Dave and I'm from Syria, all we need to write on the passenger list is Dave from Syria, and Rwanda would let the plane land. No other place, no other airport in the world will allow you to do that. They want to know who that person is. We could send anyone on any plane and they would accept it. And the idea of that they have a limited accommodation. Accommodation was irrelevant. These people don't want to be in Rwanda, or they would have gone there. They wanted to be in the UK. You fly them to Rwanda, they're not staying there. They're leaving straight away. So it was purely an agreement of, we will pay Rwanda some money to have an airstrip that we can land hundreds of thousands of people at, and it won't matter. And it's not the UK. So to come back to the ECHR, the problem that we have there is that good intentions have then been abused by those with political ideologies, and actually is our problem. It's our courts, it's our judges who have allowed that misinterpretation.
Absolutely.
And so there are other ways, I think, that we could have solved this, of actually solving our own problem. It's a more difficult problem, but getting rid of the ideological judges, getting rid of those who are politically trying to use the ECHR with ill intent to try and allow anyone from any country to come here. And I understand the difficulty that a judge may have of, this person doesn't have a right to be in this country. Yeah, but the country I'd be sending them back to is worse. I'm committing this person to a worse life if I agree to let them leave. And I don't want to be mean. Why would I want to be mean to a person that I don't know? You know, everyone should be able to have a nice life. Yeah, but they don't have a right to it. This is our home, our nation, and we need to protect it, or it won't be a nice nation to live in. There's a reason why it's nice, because we've fought to make it nice. And that comes with a responsibility to look after it, to protect it. We're passed down our nation from the generations before who fought and died to make it the place that it is, and we are neglecting that responsibility currently. And it hurts me to see it happen. Brexit was only one part of the battle. We have larger battles to fight to get to a point where we have an actual mental separation with the disease that is the progressive EU mindset. But there are positives here, you know, to be able to end the conversation on positives. The EU, over the course of the next 2 years, had multiple elections taking place that are going to radically change both the structure of the EU Parliament and the major nations within the EU, to a point where I'm not sure the EU will continue to exist. Now,
what about Romania though, Gully, and what's just happened?
Yeah, and Bulgaria as well, you know, and
phenomenal.
Yeah,
but in regard to Romania not being happy with the people they put forward to elect.
Yeah, and it's you're seeing this backlash now, and the EU political engine is really starting to look like it's worried.
Yeah,
and pushing back in big way now, and you see it with the wanting to put aside the Russian money that it's seized to be able to offer it as loans to Ukraine. But so many, like Belgium is fighting back against it. The country with the capital of the EU within it is fighting back against the EU. And I find that an amazing thing to be happening at the same time as the obvious political positioning of the fines that are going out to US tech companies. And it's so obvious the way that they've done that. Of, we're not getting our way, so we're going to fine you instead to try and bring you in line. First they did Musk, and then Google the next few days after. It's clear that it's just been politically timed. They're fighting for their lives, and I think many people in the UK forget that Brexit is an existential crisis for the EU. If Brexit succeeded, if the UK was perfectly fine outside the EU, then it is an alarm bell, a klaxon to every other country of, why are we doing this? Why are we paying to do this? And some of the nations in the EU are getting money. They are net recipients. They pay 10 billion in, they get 20 billion back. Why would you leave that if you're being given money? But on the flip side, if you're getting nothing from it, if you're a net contributor, like France, like Germany, and actually it is worse being members and it's costing you a fortune, why would you do it? And that's the situation they're finding themselves in.
Absolutely. Gully, it's been a fascinating conversation. Could you please tell us in the last sort of 30 seconds where people could find the book, find you, where they can follow you, which I need to do. I think I'll get in the fray and give you some support. So where can they find you?
So the book's for sale. I'd like to say all good bookshops. It's listed on all good bookshops as existing, but I know it's stocked heavily on Amazon. We've just had to do another run because they've sold out. So that's good news. It's available in paperback, on ebook, and it will be coming out on audiobook in the new year as well. There are select stockists who are comfortable with stocking books that might not agree with their ideology across the country as well. In terms of where you can find me, you'll find me most of the time on X or on Twitter, as it used to be known. Terror or Bust is my screen name, but Gully Foyle, you'll be able to track me down relatively easily. I've also recently started a Substack, which you'll be able to find as well, but I've not posted much on that yet. Hopefully I'll find more time to keep up with that as well.
Yeah.
And I've started doing a limited number of book tour events around the country. Obviously, a man who goes by a pseudonym and doesn't show his face at many things is quite difficult to do book tours. But I've had a limited number of events so far this year, and I'm looking to scale that up in the new year and do a number more. So hopefully I'll be coming to an event near your listeners soon over the course of the next few months.
That'd be brilliant. That'd be brilliant, and it'd be lovely to meet you. Gully, thank you. In fact, I'll tell you what, we'll have another conversation because there's so much to talk about. And you've certainly got a gist of things of where I'm coming from. But thank you so much. I'm going to play us out as we're so much against the hour. But Gully, thank you so much for joining me. It's very much appreciated, and I look forward to you sharing this as well. All right.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Stay there, and I'll say goodbye to you on the other side. Thank you.